The Federal Reserve is an organization that Anonymous is collectively against, but if it falls, the entire United States will be thrown into a state worse than the Great Depression. An economic collapse means that no one can buy food, shelter, and other basic necessities. Gas shortages will take place, and electricity could potentially be shut off. Now, you're asking, what do you mean, economic collapse? You see, the Federal Reserve runs on a debt-based system. There are currently only 258 billion physical US dollars in existence. Walmart makes more in a year than that. That means that the rest of the US currency is digital. This digital currency only has value because it is credit from other nations. Most of the money in the United States is borrowed from foreign countries. That means that the countries can take it back. Once they realize that the US is never going to be able to pay them back, they will take back their investment. Guess what that means? All of the money in bank accounts will vanish. Credit cards will be useless. This nearly happened in 2008, when the housing market crashed. They took back their investments, their money. Farmers won't be able to buy materials to farm, thus, grocery stores won't have any food. You could argue that that would mean the success of Operation Icarus. That is true, but at the cost of the US as we know it. Wait, but Japan already has a debt that is more than double that of its GDP. How come this hasn't happened to them? Oh yeah. But Japan's economy recently collapsed in 1990, and many economists have predicted that it will again within the next few years. Sweden, another debt-based economy, is also on the verge of collapse. But Greece completely collapsed because it is a debt-based economy. Investors begin to take money out, and they were forced to hyperinflate their currency in order to pay them back. The EU was recently forced to pay them $7.8 billion so Greece can pay back the debt. Something similar will happen to the US. Without the credit and money in the bank, people are going to need cash. So the government will have to print crazy amounts of money to compensate for the American people's losses. So, the good news. There will be no more debt. The debt in the US will reset, and people who owe money won't owe that money anymore. Without the banks, everyone will own each of their houses. Okay, this has been happening for a while, so why hasn't the US already collapsed? The government dropped the interest rates to zero in 2008, and the US has survived because so many investors trust the United States stock. Once the investors leave, basically when the countries start taking back their debt, when the country can't borrow anymore, the stocks will plummet, and the stock market will crash. What does that mean? It means the fall of the banks, and good news for Anonymous. Operation Icarus will have succeeded. The Federal Reserve is meant to fail. All it was intended to do was benefit the makers during their lifetimes. This also means that US citizens will need a viable alternative currency soon. Bitcoin looked promising, but the sad reality is that it is no longer feasible. Bitcoin banks have been hacked 10 times, and Bitcoin banks simply cannot take on the US population. They've all reached their transaction limit more than once, despite only around 5% of the population using it. That 5% can't even use it for average, everyday activities. So, if Bitcoin isn't viable, now what? There's two more currencies that currently hold promise. One is Ethereum. Its value has risen substantially. Ethereum is secure and looks to be able to take on the US population. Also, the Ethereum network can be used for a lot more than currency. It seems to be a link for computers, much like the internet, except it is anonymous. Moreno is the other currency. Although its value isn't nearly as high as Ethereum or Bitcoin, Moreno is an anonymous currency that promises to be secure. It isn't clear if Moreno can take on enough transactions, but it holds promise. Now, the fall of the Federal Reserve might mean the fall of the government. That might be good, depending on your point of view. People will become fed up and just riot and knock down Washington. First, I need to address something. Every country in the world will have an economic collapse at some point. Greece has already shown us why every first world country